Camping with the President by Ginger Wadsworth, illustrated by Karen Dugan. President Theodore Roosevelt mounted his favorite horse and shook the reins. He and Renown shot out the White House stable door. They galloped straight for the woods on their daily ride. As always, hooves pounded behind them. The president made sure that the Secret Service had to ride hard to keep up with him. America's 26th president loved his busy job, except for one thing. He missed what he called the strenuous life. He wanted to hike alone through the woods whistling for birds. He longed to chop wood or hunt wild animals. Most nights, he set aside time to read. Some of his favorite books were about nature. One evening in the White House, the president finished John Muir's newest book, Our National Parks. The author's descriptions of California's Yosemite National Park fascinated the president. He tried to picture the 3,000-foot-high walls that surrounded Yosemite Valley. Besides all the waterfalls, there were granite boulders bigger than buildings, with names like Half Dome and North Dome. Distant mountain peaks soared over 10,000 feet into the sky. Muir's nature essays clearly indicated a man with strong opinions about land preservation. Roosevelt enjoyed lively discussions. It would be exciting to talk with the country's best-known expert on conservation and explore Yosemite. But why couldn't he? He was the president of the entire United States, wasn't he? The president picked up his pen. He wrote so fast that his spectacles danced to the tip of his nose. Dear Mr. Muir, I am coming west. I want to go camping with you and no one else. In his letter, he explained that he had already decided to take a fact-finding trip in the spring of 1903. Roosevelt had never seen the Far West, and he was eager to meet the people and learn about the natural resources, such as minerals, trees, and water. This visit would help the president make better decisions about the region in the future. Roosevelt wrote Muir that he would first visit Yellowstone National Park. After seeing the Grand Canyon and Arizona, he would come to California by train. To wrap up his trip, the president asked Muir to guide him through the Yosemite area. While camping and avoiding dignitaries, they could talk. The president grinned as he stamped his official seal on the back of the envelope. Camping sounded bully. He especially wanted to see California's giant sequoia trees, the largest living things in the world. 4 whole days in the Yosemite wilderness. The president felt giddy with excitement. He would have to get some Western clothes. Months later, the president's special train sped southeast across California, from Oakland on the coast to reach the tiny town of Raymond at the end of the railroad line. I am delighted to meet you, President Theodore Roosevelt said, pumping Muir's hand up and down. Stop and check. Ask and answer questions. Why does the president want to talk to John Muir? Go back to the text to find the answer. Soon, Roosevelt and Muir were escorted with the rest of the presidential party in stagecoaches some 30 miles up through the foothills of the Sierra Nevada into the Yosemite wilderness. The 2 men stood in the Mariposa Grove of big trees in front of the Grizzly Giant, one of the largest giant sequoia trees in the world. On either side of Muir and Roosevelt, important men, including George Pardee, governor of California, posed for the cameras. Poof! Burning white flash powder blinded them. Roosevelt smiled his famous toothy grin for the cameras. Reporters would write about the grizzly giant and the other trees in this grove, but they wouldn't have much else to write about because the president didn't plan on seeing them anytime soon. The president announced that he was prepared to go into the Yosemite with John Muir. "I want to drop politics absolutely for 4 days." He punched his fist in his hand for emphasis. Everyone roared with disappointment, but there was no arguing with the strong-willed leader of the United States. He waved away the reporters. All the dignitaries climbed into their stagecoaches. 30 cavalrymen mounted their dapple-gray horses. They saluted their president. Finally, the president even ordered his Secret Service men to stay away. Spurs jingled and leather creaked. The president watched everyone head down the zigzagging road to the nearest town. Three men waited with the pack animals and gear. They were under the watchful eye of Government Ranger Charlie Leidig. Charlie's family ran a hotel in Yosemite Valley, where he had lived and worked his entire life. He was the perfect man to be in charge of the day-to-day details of the camping trip. Centuries-old giant sequoia trees surrounded Roosevelt. He reached out to touch the cinnamon-colored bark of the grizzly giant. It felt spongy. Twisted tree limbs reached toward the sky, so heavy they didn't even sway in the afternoon wind. Deep in the forest, a squirrel chattered. Then a bird sang. The president whistled back, hoping to draw out his first Yosemite bird. A robin dropped from a branch and pushed debris about on the forest floor. Roosevelt pulled out a pocket-sized notebook he always carried. He wrote down Yosemite Wilderness, May 1903. Robin. Then the president sucked in a deep breath of brisk mountain air. "Now this is bully," he shouted. "Boys, let's build a campfire." When Roosevelt woke up the next morning, he recognized the wonderful music of a hermit thrush, one of his favorite birds. The president was starving. He wrestled the fry pan from Charlie. Before long, bacon-scented smoke drifted into the forest. Then the president scrambled 6 eggs beside the slab of bacon. He ate a huge breakfast, happy to be away from the White House cooks who fussed over his diet. After nibbling on a crust of bread, John Muir picked up a sequoia cone. He shook it. Tiny dark seeds, much smaller than snowflakes, spilled out. Muir explained that from just one seed, the grizzly giant had sprouted about 2,000 years earlier. Other trees in the grove were almost as old. Many were hundreds of years old. Sequoias, Muir added, grew on the western slopes of the Sierra Nevada, but nowhere else in the entire world. Roosevelt's eyes widened with surprise. Stop and check. Ask and answer questions. Why is the president surprised? Find details in the text to support your answer. Moments later, Muir scrambled up a nearby sequoia tree stump like a giant goat. He is pretty spry for a 65-year-old, Roosevelt thought. The stump's flat top was big enough to hold a dozen men or more. Muir yelled that it had taken several days to saw down this tree. When it crashed to the ground, the tree shattered into splinters. Sequoia wood was of little use except for fence posts, but lumbermen still continued to cut these trees. The president shook his head in disgust. How could anyone cut a tree that had been growing for so long? For fence posts? What if future generations never saw a giant sequoia tree? He and Mr. Muir would have to chat about forest preservation. But later, it was time to go. Roosevelt swallowed one last cup of coffee, strong and hot, just the way he liked it.